So this is week 8 essay questions. The question reads, describe the sequence of events that occur when you are very hungry and enter a house where you smell delicious food cooking. And you need to include both nervous system and digestive system processes. So digestion begins even before you put food in your mouth. When you feel hungry or if you smell certain foods, your body sends a message to your brain to let you know, hey, it's time to eat, or hey, you're hungry. This signal is sent to your brain, which then lets our mouths know to get ready, and you start to salivate in preparation for a meal. Once you've eaten, your digestive system then breaks down the food into smaller components. Once the smaller components have been broken down, they will be absorbed into the blood and delivered to cells throughout the body for energy or for building blocks needed for cells to function. The digestive system is one of the 11 organ systems of the human body, and it is composed of several hollow tube-shaped organs, including the mouth all the way down to your rectum and anus. So from the mouth to the stomach, this is the first step of the digestion process is called ingestion, which is the collection of food into the digestive tract. It may seem a simple process, but ingestion involves smelling food, thinking about food, and the involuntary release of saliva. In the mouth, where the second step of digestion occurs, the mechanical and chemical breakdown of food begins. The chemical breakdown of food involves enzymes which break apart the components in food. The enzyme, for example, amylase, is secreted to break down complex carbohydrates. Mechanical breakdown starts with mastication or chewing in the mouth. Teeth crush and grind large food particles, which saliva initiates the chemical breakdown of food and enables its movement downward. The slippery mass of partially broken down food is called bolus, which moves down the digestive tract as you swallow. Swallowing may seem voluntary at first, but it requires conscious effort to push the food with the tongue back towards the throat, but after this, swallowing proceeds involuntary, meaning it cannot be stopped once it begins. As you swallow, the bolus is pushed from the mouth through the pharynx and into a muscular tube called the esophagus. As it travels throughout the pharynx, a small flap called the epiglottis closes to prevent choking by keeping food from going into the trachea. Peristaltic contractions in the esophagus propel the food down to the stomach. At the junction between the esophagus and stomach, there is a sphincter muscle that remains closed until the food bolus approaches. The pressure of the food bolus stimulates the lower esophageal sphincter to relax and open, and the food then moves from the esophagus into the stomach. The mechanical breakdown of food is accentuated by the muscular contractions of the stomach and small intestine that mash, mix, slosh, and propel food down the alimentary canal. Solid food can take between 4 to 8 seconds to travel down the epiglottis, and liquids take about a second. When food enters the stomach, a highly muscular organ, powerful peristaltic contractions help mash, pulverize, and churn food into chyme. Chyme is a semi-liquid mass of partially digested food that also contains gastric juices secreted by cells in the stomach. Cells in the stomach also secrete hydrochloric acid and the enzyme pepsin that chemically breaks down protein into smaller molecules. A thick mucus coat lines the stomach to protect it from digesting its cells. The stomach has 3 basic tasks, which is to store food, to mechanically and chemically break down food, and to empty partially broken down food into the small intestine. The small intestine is divided into 3 structural parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. Once the chyme enters the duodenum, 3 accessory or helper organs, which are the liver, pancreas, and the gallbladder, are stimulated to release juices that aid in digestion. The pancreas secretes up to 1.5 liters of pancreatic juice through a duct into the duodenum per day. This fluid consists mostly of water, but it also contains bicarbonate ions that neutralize the acidity of the stomach-derived chyme and enzymes that further break down proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. The gallbladder secretes a much smaller amount of bile to help digest fats, also through a duct that leads to the duodenum. Bile is made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Bile's components act like detergents by surrounding fats, similar to the way dish soap removes grease from a frying pan. This allows for the movement of fats in the watery environment of the small intestine. Two different types of muscular contractions called peristalsis and segmentation move and mix the food in various stages of the digestion through the small intestine. Similar to what occurs in the esophagus and stomach, peristalsis is circular waves of smooth muscle contraction that propel food forward. Segmentation sloshes food back and forth in both directions, promoting further mixture of the chyme. Almost all the components of food are completely broken down to their simplest unit within the first 25 centimeters of the small intestine. Instead of proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, the chyme now consists of amino acids and emulsified fatty acids. The next step of digestion, which is nutrient absorption, takes place in the remaining length of the small intestine, or the ileum. Alrighty, so the processes of digestion includes two processes, physical and chemical. During the physical processes, the food is mixed and moved throughout the gastrointestinal tract. This process is also referred to as motility, and the partially digested food is propelled by the wave-like action called peristalsis. Ring-like muscular valves called sphincters prevent the backflow of partially digested food and digestive juices. There are sphincters between the esophagus and stomach, between the stomach and the small intestine, and the small intestine and colon. The chemical process of digestion involves the release of water, acid, carbonate, and enzymes to be mixed with the food to further break it down into simpler subunits. Our nervous system and hormones control digestion. The nervous system consists of the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. There are two components to the peripheral system, the somatic system that supplies the skin and muscle, and the autonomic system, which supplies the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and the glands. Pardon me. So, for example, the hormone gastrin, which is originated into the stomach, its stimulus are the food that we eat, especially the proteins, caffeine, spices, etc. The action of gastrin is to stimulate stomach acids and enzymes. Cholecystokinin, which is stored in the small intestine, stimulates pancreas and liver secretions for protein and fat digestion. Secretin, which is also in the small intestine, secretes bicarbonate to neutralize acid. And GIP, which is gastric inhibitory protein, which is stored in the small intestine, inhibits gastric motility and the secretion of gastric juices.